The two Joes met for the toss-up, Mercer and Harvey. Mercer won it for Arsenal. Jackie Milburn kicked off for Newcastle, and 100,000 voices got going as well as the players. The Gunners
being out on the field there, the people who watched, they wanted to be in your position. It's as simple as that. And I was delighted, but I'll tell you this, I wouldn't have been half the player without the encouragement of my own local people here. They made me for what I was. Well, football's a wonderful thing up here, you know. You've got to be born here to appreciate this. You're either red and white or black and white, you know, and I was fortunate to get to play for this team. It's something that I always wanted, and I wished I was just starting, quite honestly. There's 30,000 people, and if you halve that, you say 15,000 males. So in our early days, I would suggest that if there wasn't 15,000 males playing football, there was 15,000 males thinking about it. And every back streets that you could go from one end to the other, they were all footballers at heart. I can never ever remember going up a back street where there wasn't a team going, where there wasn't a match going on. And there was the Jimmy Adamsons and the Billy Grays, as well as the Charltons, the Milburns. Terrific atmosphere. But then, speaking old-fashionedly, there wasn't much more to do in those days either.
Well, playing in the back streets, and we used to play by floodlights before floodlights were ever thought about. One goal was at one lamppost, and the midfield was in complete darkness, and the other goal was at the next lamppost. The goals were generally just the jackets put down as goalposts. The only rule was that you took care not to break the windows of the houses opposite.
Football was every young lad's ambition. That was every young lad's ambition, to play for Newcastle.
Yeah, a terrific left foot. He was left-handed, left-footed, you know. And I used to go to my Granny Thompson's every night, you know. We used to sleep there. And he used to get this stone out when he came home from school, the East School, and I never found out where he kept that stone. He had it hidden somewhere behind a brick in the wall of one of the, you know, you had the outside toilets and coal houses in those days. And he kicked this stone, and he had this stone for many years, right up to Granny Thompson's, and then when he came back to school in the morning, he kicked it all the way back, and I could still never find it. But the left shoe, left boot was always gone before the right one, you know. He used to get a new pair once a fortnight, and then, while the other ones were at the cobblers. spent a lot of time in the backyard because actually you couldn't go out into the streets very much in the winter time, especially because it was practically ankle deep in dirt. Used to be always thump, 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 you know. I think the neighbours used to say, there's that Jackie Milburn on again, thumping the ball. There was something about it fascinated him. I don't know what it was, but it was this kicking the ball, and there must have been that determination somewhere. I can't understand. Of course, he's just my brother, you know.
When we were laddies, up in the 6th row like, we used to live, breathe, eat and sleep football. I mind on one Christmas, Jackie must have been 8 or 9, and he'd got the first spanking brand new pair of football boots he'd ever had. 4 o'clock in the morning, Christmas Day, there he was, tappy-lapping at the house in Chestnut Street, so as not to wake anybody up, and off to his granny's in the 6th row for a game of football with his ma's. But mind what a shocking disappointment when he got there. Well, he couldn't get a game because we had even sides, you know. Well, you see, we'd all gotten new boots for Christmas and all, and the back lane was chock-a-block with floodlit footballers. Oh, and how you should have seen his face. Talk about miserable. But that was Jackie Milburn, hello. You had to practically tie his feet together to keep them still.
Everything he did, he used to run, you know. He used to go messages for people. He used to make a fortune on the side. Not a fortune, but he used to make a penny here and a halfpenny there, you know. And that was spent on trying to save up for a football or a pair of football boots, you know, things like that. And of course, they all used to come and seek our Jack because he was so quick. And the school sports, I used to take the school sports every time we went on.
Let's see, the East School, I went there in 1939-ish. And of course, first intake, you went into the hall, you see. So we goes into the hall and stand there and the headmaster gives you the rules and regulations of the premises. And so you're detailed off which class you're going to, you see, 1A, B or whatever. So you lined up to come out, and as you come out, you see, of course, there was a congestion, and you're standing there. So when I was standing, there was a board, a rule of honour it was. J. Milburn, J. Milburn. And I thought, who the hell's this? And then I inquired later, and it was Jack, really. Didn't know me, of course.
You see, in those days, you could only go down the mine. That was the thing in those days. And my mother and father, I don't think were very keen to have him go down there, but there wasn't much alternative. So he waited until he got an apprenticeship when he was 16. And he worked in the saddler's shop, making knee pads and tool boxes for the men out of leather. Actually, his ambition was to be a fitter at the colliery.
Oh, well, at lunchtime, you know, we used to break up at 10 minutes to 12 till 12:30 for your dinner, what we used to call our bait time. And Jackie living in the 4th row and I lived in the 9th row. We had to go home for our dinners. And we used to run home, eat our dinners, gallop it down, and then run out the welfare and start and play football to the buzzer. You know, we used to have a buzzer which sounded for when you started work. Of course, we were playing with our pit boots and whatnot, you know. It wasn't football gear, you know, your overalls and it was, I say, sometimes 20, 30 aside.
For a little short while, Jack's love for football went down slightly when he got the feel for greyhound racing. I personally had to persuade him to give up the racing to play football on more than one or two occasions. Thankfully to us and thankfully to the world, he forgot that side of it, although it always remained a very dominant part of his social side life, the greyhounds. I think he liked the dogs so much because it was so thrilling to see something hurtle around the track. He had a little gambling instinct, Jack, you know, and the gambling instinct plus the fast speed of the greyhounds, which I understand he was likened to on several occasions when he was playing football.
Jack did take training very seriously. You know, he looked after himself really very well. And a lot of exercise, but mainly running. And then later, running with football boots on. And this developed the speed, which he had in later years.
Coal is a vital munition of war. The coal face, an underground front. No wonder that the position was taken so seriously when a deficit of 11 million tons appeared probable this winter. Naturally, drastic measures were called for. But reducing consumption was only half the battle. Could anything be done to increase production?
Walking down the pits was the reserved occupation then, like. You couldn't get called up. But even though we couldn't get into the real thing, Jackie and a whole gang of us showed willing by joining the local air training corps. But it was probably the football rather than the flying that was the main attraction, like. And hey, with Jackie in full flight, what a team we had.
And we very rarely got beats. Very, very rarely. And Jack's skills came to the fore very much then. One particular game that I remember was following a challenge in the local paper. And we persuaded, Jack and I, Mr. Morton, who was then our sportsmaster, to challenge this side to play. So it was duly arranged, and we played at the Rec, as we called it, at Ashington. And we won 18-1, I think it was. It might have been 16-1. And I think Jack scored about 6 or 7 then. In fact, every player in the team scored a goal, because we brought Bill Chambers out of goal to take a penalty kick and he scored. So we did well. The time came round to apply for the trials at Newcastle, and I worked then in the mining offices of the Ashington Coal Company, and we decided we would write a letter to Mr. Watts, who was then secretary of the Newcastle United. And we just put our facts and figures on the paper, and our weights and heights, and I can tell you we're a lot lighter than we were now, but we wrote giving him all the details of what we had done, what we hoped to do. I think I got the job because Jack thought that I could write that a little bit better than he could.
Once he got that reply, the first thing, the next morning at work, he said, I've got a trial game for Newcastle. Can I borrow your boots? He said, I'll break them in for you. I said, of course, just like, said, you can borrow my bike, it doesn't really matter. And he spent 3 weeks breaking these boots in, putting them on, bending them, running with them, plastering them with balls, you know, running and sprinting with them on. And after about 3 or 4 weeks, they were perfect. And that's when he went off to Newcastle for his trial game with Raymond Foxton. He and Raymond arrived very early, and they had their lunch. It consisted of 2 pork pies, I think, and a bottle of pop. And with him being successful at Newcastle United, this must have become a tradition with Jack, because he was very superstitious. And I think from there on that became his normal lunch before playing football. It seemed to be a lucky charm for him anyway.
It was quite an emotional day, which is very strong even in my mind yet. And of course, needless to say, Jack played his heart out. I think we both played our heart out, but Jack came through so wonderfully well. It was impossible to recall what a wonderful thrill he must have had to himself.
Jackie, I remember saying, I'm going for a trial to Newcastle. Great. Came into the dance that night and we're all on edge, you know. Well, how did you get on? How did you get on? I scored 6 goals, he said. Oh, pull the other one, we said. Come on, how did you really get on? But of course it turned out that it was right. He did score 6 goals at his trial. And of course he never looked behind him from that day. Well,
I remember coming off the pitch that Jack was quickly surrounded by more than one director, but the director that stood out in my mind was Stan Seymour, Senior, and he was elated with Jack's performance. Jack's reaction was immediate, that I could see from then that he had black and white eyes as from that moment, and there was no doubt in his mind what he was going to do. The pit then, I'm sure, became an evil part of his past.
Right away, Newcastle fight back. They're shaping better in the heavy going. Harvey dribbles through and passes. Taylor shoots, and it's 1-1. There's only half a cheer. The Bristol crowd stunned for the moment. Newcastle again. Right winger Walker picks up a pass. Fox tries to rob him, but he's away. A back pass to Crowe, who shoots. Hoyle's unsighted, and it's a goal. Newcastle 2, Bristol Rovers 1. The Newcastle machine's in top gear now. Here comes another attack. Milburn shoots, and it's Newcastle 3, Rovers 1. 3 goals in 13 minutes.
I think when Jackie came into prominence, I think it was because we'd all been through bad times during the war. I think football was beginning to take off again. I think people made a point of homing into St James's Park on a Saturday, all weathers, and I think Jackie, with his goal-scoring ability, became the idol of the black and whites, you know. I really do.
Newcastle, however, were not prepared to let them get away with it like that. The next 15 minutes saw them going all out to equalise, and this they succeeded in doing when Milburn banged one home.
There were so many of us in them days that only wanted to play for Newcastle United. You know, we were black and white daft, and it meant so much to us because of our families and our supporters. And I think amongst the Cowles and the Crowes and the Milburns and the Harveys and people like this, we're very much a family. We cared for each other. We cared for each other's performances. We lived together so much in terms of going away a week in a hotel or 10 weeks on a tour or flying here or flying there. And the family atmosphere that was created at that particular time was something very special. We all earned the same money. We all earned the same bonuses. We all got the same little perks, whatever they were. And with a club like Newcastle, you were very well treated. And nobody in the country got any more money than what we did at that particular time. And as I say, we had the opportunity to go on many weeks special training, either to Norbeck at Blackpool or to the different places up and down the country, Brighton. But we knew that we were all on the same, and it created a great spirit within the club, and I think we produced the success that it deserved.
Me and Laurie used to watch him training through the restaurant window. We were both waitresses at this hotel, you see, where the team was staying. next thing I knew, Laura had met Jackie Milburn, and, well, it was a sudden romance, really. They got married within 3 months of meeting. I think they were married in a registry office down here. Laura's mum worked at the hotel too, and I remember how flabbergasted she was at the suddenness of it all. But, blimey, we all were.
Shattered. We didn't think he would be so impulsive. He wasn't an impulsive sort of person, really, you know. But it must have been love at first sight, because when he came back and told us we just couldn't believe it. And then she came very shortly afterwards. He brought her up. He was married in London, of course. And of course, as soon as we met her, we liked her. Everybody liked her. And of course, she's proved to be a very good wife to him over the years. I shall always be thankful for Laura looking after our Jack the way she did. She was always behind him, and she was there to help him all the time.
This is Movie Tone. Lionel Gamlin reporting.
The fervent voices of the Welsh crowd must have made the English team a bit apprehensive as they posed for their picture before the start of the International at Cardiff, but even the blessing by leak which greeted Wales failed to bring them over much luck. In the early stages, they did everything but score. There's Griffiths, number 7, who later got the home team's only goal. Then, when it looked as though Wales were well on top, England scored 3 times in 13 minutes, Milburn netting twice. The English captain was still limping from a leg injury as he led his team out after the interval, but when Milburn notched a personal hat-trick and England's 4th, it seemed that luck was certainly on England's side.
Well, I believe he finished off with 13 caps, and again we have to probably appreciate that there wasn't as many international games in them days as what there is at this particular time. But Jackie did get in the side, and as I said, he was capped 13 times, but at nowhere near what his particular career had deserved. And Sir Walter Winterbottom was in charge of the England team, and you know, we were in Newcastle, which was somewhere near Scotland, and he always felt that you had to do well when you played down in London.
At London Airport, England's team for the World Soccer Cup at Rio faces a battery of cameras big enough to shake a star as the players come to board their plane. Captain Billy Wright of the Wolves watches as passports are handed out. This one belongs to Hughes of Liverpool. Nicholson of the Spurs seems to be taking the nice new England badge on Watson's blazer. Newcastle's Milburn and Mortensen of Blackpool are checking up on the plane's record, or records.
His personality was good. He was very quiet, he was very shy. But once you got to know him, you got a bit of devil, you know, underneath. He was a typical Geordie underneath. And he fitted in well. But it was difficult. He came in when you had the stars, shall we say. You had the Swift, the Lawton, the Mannions, and the Finneys, who were star players. If I played behind Matthews, as an example, I asked Joe Mercer, our skipper, I said, what do I do playing behind Matthews? And he says, I'll just give him the ball. I said, what do I do then? He said, let him get on with it. And that was when you played with stars. You gave them the ball and they did their own thing. And so Jackie playing for Newcastle didn't have that situation because he was playing with a team. When you come to England, you had to try to give your team games you play for Newcastle, but it was very difficult when you're playing with stars. And I think he found that always be difficult.
Only in flashes does England's old form break through. Newcastle's Jackie Milburn, number 9, tries hard all the time, but goalie Cowan stops everything. After him, Billy Steele, number 10, is Scotland's other hero.
I don't know, it was a full international, but it was against Scotland. And Wilf Manning, and there was Bailey in him playing at the time. And Jackie never got a pass of the ball from Manning or Bailey. And he was, at half-time, he went in the dressing room and he came out and he was absolutely fuming. And he says, the hell with you. He went into his own half and got the ball and he just went directly bang straight down and bashed it one straight in the back of the net. Came off He says them that they had a lot of snubs. He was, you know, that was the thing about Jackie. You know, he wasn't a snub. Fair enough, he mixed with a lot of people, but he always remembered his home ground. He was just a local lad.
Mortensen sends the ball out to Tom Finney. The Preston winger, who had been playing below his best, sends over a lovely centre. Mortensen shoots, and Milburn's foot sends the ball into the net. A consolation goal indeed, for Scotland's triumph is complete.
When he came home from the matches and that, it was always... there was a post-mortem on every game he played, my father, you know. Every Saturday night, home game. I don't think Jack liked it very much, mind. But they used to go through every move, and we used to have a house full of his friends every Saturday night till about 2 o'clock in the morning. And while we were discussing the game, we used to play darts. A game called cricket, you know. There was about 22 players involved, so I'll tell you how many was in the house. And this used to go on till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And Jack had been to work from about 6 in the morning, worked a shift at the colliery, gone and played football, and he was still sitting talking football at 2 o'clock in the morning.
In order to play on a Saturday, he and I used to have to work all day Friday, double back on Friday night and work an extra shift in order to get time off. At the end of the shift, we would get ready to go for a match, and he would get his boots out the cupboard, which were all ready for moving with wrapped in brown paper. Everything was wrapped in brown paper then, and even then, mind, this was cup games as well. The old pork pie still came out. That was his tradition. That was his lunch, 2 pork pies and a bottle of pop. And off we would go, straight in a room match. No preparation. Straight in there, and win.
The event had scarcely died down when they were given cause to cheer again. Another 2-1 victory, so Newcastle beat Blackpool on the great day.
In the 50s, during Newcastle's great days, I was working for the BBC, and London asked me to record the noise of the fans cheering a Newcastle goal. So match after match, I went to St. James's Park with a midget recorder. They'd just come out. They're called midgets. They weren't very small, you know, to get this great noise, you know, and they never scored. They were keeping themselves for Wembley. And I told Jackie about this some years later. And he said, "Why, Arthur, man? Why didn't you tell us? Would have scored one for you."
Before a capacity crowd, but none has quite that indefinable something which belongs to the cup final. And here they come, Newcastle in the stripes and Blackpool, their second final in 3 years. His Majesty was present, and as is the custom, met the teams beforehand. Were lucky with the toss, and Harvey showed them which way to go. Then Mortensen gave the ball the first kick, and the game was on. It was a scrappy beginning, long kicks and little concerted movement. Even Stanley Matthews couldn't really get weaving, and the goalies had little to do. The offside trap was much in evidence, and Newcastle were often caught, once when Milburn got the ball into the net, only to have it disallowed. Still no score in the 1951 Cup final. Blackpool got nearer to scoring than at any time during the game when the ball was just headed clear of an open goal.
Well, what one remembers about the 51 Cup final are the goals, which there were 2 of them, which were quite special. But Jackie himself always said that the first goal was the one which needed greater concentration, that the demands were greater on him, because he got the ball about the halfway line. He checked that he was onside, and then he had this long way to run with the defender pounding on his heels. You know, one can easily sort of panic, but he didn't. A tremendous shot, tremendous shot.
Newcastle, by now far the superior team, were using the back heel extensively, and it was one of these which led to their second goal. Taylor surrounded, back heels to Milburn, who beat Farm from about 25 yards. So that was that. Newcastle 2, Blackpool 0. And now for the presentation of the cup.
Oh, you thought you were transported into another world. I mean, I've never seen Newcastle like this before. I mean, all these milling masses around, you know. It was something that you'd never forget. I mean, that's why I always say that the first year that we won the cup was the best year. It will never be repeated, even that you get it again. I mean, we had the same again coming back the second year, but it was never the same as the first year. The first year was the best, and the first time's always the best.
Gentlemen, this is the proudest day of our lives, isn't it, lads? I think we've kidded you on a bit the last week or two, do you know? But we knew within ourselves, we knew what would happen at Wembley. We all were back full of confidence last Saturday morning, and anyhow, we don't want to come back with it.
It's odd in a way that Jackie was so mild and modest a man, a retiring man, and yet he was a man for a big occasion. He came to life. You see, give him a Wembley stage or a semi-final match or a crucial league game, and there was this retiring, modest fella blooming into being a dramatic and spectacular player. How wonderful. He had a long stride, a sort of loping stride. He was clean-limbed. The sight of Jackie Milburn getting free in the clear with the ball was one of the greatest sights in football. He was fast, as I say. He looked good. It was good to see him going. Then he shot well. See, this was the drama in the man, that he had speed and he had shooting ability. Once he was in the clear, everybody was watching, everybody was on the alert, because they knew something could happen. He had this explosive ability. One of these players who could change a game, you see. But he also used to hook the ball back from a man by sliding in with a long leg. It seemed to go on, and he would hook the ball back from a player. Beardsley tries to do it now, but not as neatly, not as nicely as Jackie did.
I mean, my memory was of this tremendous turn of speed. A long ball came from somebody like Frank Brennan right down the middle of the field, and Jackie Milburn was onto it, and he had such tremendous speed, and the power of his shot was electric, and it kind of electrified everybody when he got going.
Jack played his heart out for the Geordie public and loved every minute of it. I never knew a nicer man. I never knew a tougher opponent either. We had a laddie called Tommy Blenkinsop, who started playing at number 5. He was actually, or always had been, a wing half, and not really tall enough for a centre half. But in view of Jack's lack of heading ability, it didn't make too much difference. But I'd primed him, for God's sake, don't let Jack have the ball anywhere near the goals. Because don't worry about his heading, don't worry about cross balls, they're all yours. But anything that's on the floor, then when Jack's anywhere around, for God's sake, play it. Play it and play it quick, and you get it away. Well, it was great. No score, and we had about 5 minutes left. And this ball was played to Jack, and it was a good 30 yards out, at least. And he never even stopped it. He just smacked this ball, and it flew into the net. And this Tommy Blenkinsop turned to me, he said, "What did I do wrong?" I said, "Tom, nothing. Those kind of goals, only people like him can score. Don't worry about it." And that, this was typical of Jackie, a brilliant finisher. He just hit them when they were on target.
Jackie Milburn gets the ball, 30 yards out. He shoots, and he scored to make his hat-trick and give Newcastle the lead.
We'd gone from 1948 to 1955 without a manager. The directors had picked the team, and Mr. Seymour had virtually been managing director. And that particular season, 55, we were struggling towards the bottom of the First Division. And they decided to bring a manager in, which was a chap called Dougal Livingston. And he used to emphasise that everybody had to pay for their place. And when directors pick teams, you know, sometimes they've got the favourites and they would get more votes than somebody else. It was always a little bit controversial the way that went on at that particular time at Newcastle. But Jackie hadn't, in this particular season, been doing very well. The team hadn't. And players like Vic Keeble and Lenny White had come into the club and were beginning to score goals, and Jackie's goals had sort of dried up a little bit. And after we beat York in the semi-final, Dougie Livingston announced a team which didn't include Jackie. It included Lenny White, it included Reg Davis, and included Vic Keeble, were the players in form at that particular time. And it grew gasps of horror around a particular area of the thought of going to Wembley without Jackie. And I believe, if I can remember the story clear enough, that the board overruled the manager and that Jackie had to play.
Typical scenes of the vast crowd arriving at Wembley open the story of the Cup final. Here are some of the 100,000 or so who packed the famous stadium, and Newcastle supporters were soon singing their own signature tune.
In 1955, Bobby Cowell and I were married then, and with having 3 children, the 3rd Cup final medal was most important to us. So we were a bundle of nerves. Everybody's heart was in their mouths, waving like mad to everybody and really getting into the spirit of it. And then we were shown into the seats and the match began. And oh dear, when Jackie's goal went in the first minute, I just wanted the final whistle to go. I wanted that 3rd Cup medal so much.
Len White gave the corner kick, sent the corner kick over, and Jackie had Roy Paul, the Manchester City skipper, at his side. And just before White kicked it, Paul said to Jackie, "Hell, I should be watching Keeble." And he slipped away from Jackie, left Jackie on his own. Keeble already had a couple of men marking him, and the ball came over, and Jackie had this marvellous header.
Yes, Newcastle were 1-up with a goal in less than a minute. That was sensation number 1. They were still forcing the pace when, after some 20 minutes play, Jimmy Meadows, City's right back, was injured.
The pavements were completely covered, and people were looking out of windows, and there was the noise and the waving. It was unbelievable, really. It was a remarkable demonstration, you know, of victory again. And of course, the whole place was in love with the team.
I think from the 55 point of view, as we'd said, that Dougal Livingston, as manager, had wanted to leave Jackie out for the first time probably in his whole career at Newcastle. That ever a suggestion of him being left out of a Newcastle United team. But that had happened, and obviously some feeling between the manager and the player creates from a situation like that. However, Dougal Livingston went within a year of coming to the club, and the club continued as it had previously without a manager. But I think the sort of writing was on the wall for Jackie, and he must have got that feeling at that particular time. His goals weren't coming as regular. Lenny White and Vic Keeble were coming on and things like this. So he probably felt that the time had come when he should move on.
I think he was offered a managerial post in Ireland, I think. And he went across there as playing manager, and of course Linfield had a good side, Linfield, and they won everything across there, and Jack became player of the year and this sort of thing. But I don't think he was cut out to be in management, Jack, really. He wasn't that type of lad.
He was a Geordie. He was, I think eventually he wanted to come back home. He did it the long way round, you know. Went down to Useley, then he went to Ipswich. I think he was badly advised at the time, I don't know. He couldn't tell anyone what to do. He wasn't that type of person. He would play 12 players rather than tell one that he hadn't to go on, if you know what I mean. And it worried him a lot. He used to come and stay with me when he used to come up this way, and he used to do thousands of miles a week looking for new players. And he actually got a fantastic team up of youngsters, but he got to the stage where he couldn't take any more, and he left. And he'd been writing articles. He'd been writing articles for the papers, you know, just a freelance. And then he became a reporter, and then he served his time, and then he became a journalist full-time.
Jackie couldn't say a nasty thing about anybody. As a critic, he was the world's worst. But he did offer something through his columns of warmth and experience, and I know that when he used to mix with footballers, he would give young players hints and that sort of thing. And as a colleague, it was a lovely face to see in the press box, because you're such a charming man. You're all right, bunny lad, you know. He was always first there at the match, and it was always delightful to see Jackie in the press box.
Now the speed of the man, always giving him a chance, except that he's got a proper little fighter there, Terry Hibbett against him. And Newcastle now really springing into this game. MacDonald is away. Waldron is pulling him down. Still MacDonald. Straight at the goalkeeper. Still MacDonald. And he scored. Malcolm MacDonald. Super Mac has scored.
Jackie was a Sunday newspaper journalist, and yet he had one of the greatest PR positions in Newcastle United that I've ever known, particularly when it was unpaid, and nobody had actually given him this job. But he was always there. He was always in contact with the players, always helping. He wasn't wanting to do the dirty stories, the nasty stories. He wasn't wanting to criticise anybody. In his writings, he wanted to be constructive with regards to the players and the teams that he talked about. But when he was actually there, and he was there an awful lot, all the time he would talk and help how to overcome players' problems, advise them. And on a Friday or a Saturday, as players came in, Jackie, in his own quiet little way, he'd have his team talk in the foyer at the ground before we went in for the proper team talk with the coach and the manager. But we probably remember more that Jackie had told us by the time we got out on the pitch than what anybody else had said.
He was told 2 days before my birthday that he had cancer. They said it was treatable, it wasn't curable, and they asked him to go for this deep X-ray treatment, and Laura took him every day for 2 weeks. He took enough, I think, to kill a horse, really. He was a very strong man, but it weakened him, you know. And of course, we knew that there was nothing they could do about it, and he refused. He flatly refused to have chemotherapy because they said it could only lengthen his life by a few weeks. And he said he wanted to die with dignity, which he did. His son was with him, Jackie and Betty and Laura, and she said it was a privilege to be there when he died. And he wanted the curtains opened, and she opened the curtains and he looked at the sky. He was fascinated with the sky before he died. He was always looking at the sky. And she said there was a tear. His son told me there was a tear just came down the side of his cheek. And he just gave a smile and died. And he did die with dignity. She said it was a privilege to be there. All the traffic was stopped on the roads. All the firemen were out with their uniforms on, saluted him. And grown men were standing crying, a thing I never thought I would see. And I thought, where has all this love come from?
Jackie Milburn will always be something special in the North East because he's folklore in the North East. He's a legend. He's not just a footballer, but he's something that tells you that there's a greatness about Newcastle United.
You know, what made Jackie into a legend was his power of shooting and his speed. Now, he was a very nice chap, but there have been and are many nice people in football. He wouldn't have been a legend for his niceness. He's a legend because of what he did when the crowds were great, when you got 50 and 60,000 a match, and you had this man who could change a game, who could turn a game, who could explode into action, who looked lovely running forward, and who could shoot. You had one of the most dramatic and spectacular plays ever in the game. That is the basis. With so many people seeing him, that is the basis of him being remembered.
I think the simple answer is that he was unique. Unique in the situation that he was the local boy. He was the one who lived out all our dreams. And there were happy endings to what he attempted to do. They did go to Wembley, they did win the cup, he did score those marvellous goals at Wembley, and great goals to get them to Wembley. If anyone had created the Milburn story, people would have said it was too far-fetched, you know. Fact was far more exciting than any fiction in football.
Sadly, now that Jackie's gone, what is going to be missed most of all is Jackie stood in the foyer at St James's Park, able to advise the current players and the players of the future. And for that, Newcastle United and all of the players at Newcastle over the years will miss out tremendously on the greatest unpaid coach that I've ever met.
I don't think people will miss Jackie. People will always talk about Jackie. Every night in life on Tyneside in some pub, his name will be mentioned. And it won't be mentioned in the sort of archaic past tense. It will be as if it had just happened, this wonderful, exciting person who had graced our lives.
There was something very special about him, which is extremely difficult to define. And I think it's a combination of immense skill, a gentleman off the field and very much on the field, and a man who was extraordinarily modest and unassuming. And I think those qualities make for a hero.
I was very, very proud, and I always will be proud of my brother. He was a lovely man. I couldn't have asked for anything more. I'm very proud of him. Very proud indeed.